Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. My new book, While Israel Slept, launches this week. And in this episode, I sit down with someone whose life and career are deeply tied to the story that I tell together with my co-author, Amir Buchut. His name is David Hacham, and for 30 years, David served in Israeli intelligence and political strategic positions, including 8 years in the Gaza Strip as an advisor on Arab affairs to the commanders of the IDF Southern Command. He was on the inside during the Oslo peace process, participating in most of the meetings between Israeli leaders and Yasser Arafat. After his military service, he went on to serve as a senior advisor on Arab affairs to 6 different defense ministers, helping shape Israel's policy on Gaza at some of its most critical moments. David has also written 2 books of his own, Gaza in the Eye of the Storm and The Land Was Filled by Hamas. These are based on his firsthand experiences, his meetings with Sheikh Yassin, with Ismail Haniyeh, some of those leaders of Hamas in the early days, some who were even taken out by Israel during the last 2 years of this war. In our conversation, we talk about the rise of Hamas, the decisions that Israel made back in the 1980s and 90s, and those that it also failed to make, and how it all connects from back then to what has happened now, and what led to what my book is about, how the attack of October 7th caught Israel by surprise. It's a rare chance to hear from someone who was in the room at key moments and has spent decades trying to understand Gaza, Hamas, and Israel's broader strategic dilemmas. Here we go. David Hacham, it's great to have you with me on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to meet you again after so many years of knowledge between us.
Yes.
It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. So, we met about a year and a half ago when I was working on the book, While Israel Slept, to kind of get your input into what it was that Hamas was essentially back in the 1980s, 1990s, back when you were serving inside the Gaza Strip. Eventually, you would become the main officer in charge of all coordination between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. But one of the I think something that people now know and started to learn about more after the horrific attack on October 7, almost 2 years ago, was that to some extent the writing was on the wall for a long time, right? And not that we knew exactly what they would do or how they would do it, but when we look back today, we know that Hamas pretty much told us everything they were going to do, right? They said they're coming to kill people. They said they're coming to kidnap people. They practiced all of these things. They did it out in the open, but we believed that it wasn't going to happen. We believed in something else. But with you, David, I do want to go back in time for a moment because you were in Gaza back when Hamas just got started. You were in your office. I remember you telling me a great story, which we tell in the book, of how you were in your office when the first flyers went out. Those first posters were plastered on walls in Gaza, announcing the establishment of this new organization that no one had heard about. And this started something that quickly built into a force that Israel had to begin to confront. So before we talk about what's happening right now, because of course having you here is an opportunity also to understand where we're going in this war that still continues, take us back for a moment to 1986, 1987. Take us back to those initial days. What did we see then? What did you see? And how did it develop over time?
Yes, first of all, it's like you are bringing me, Yaakov, back like 30, 40 more years ago. It was a period of time that I served in the military, in the IDF, in the Gaza Strip. I was that period of time the head of the Arab Affairs, department, which was one of the branches, as a matter of fact, like the intelligence, civilian intelligence branch of the civil administration in the Gaza Strip. And as a matter of fact, I arrived to Gaza at the end of 1985, the beginning of 1986. And when I arrived to Gaza, as a matter of fact, to say that Hamas was emerged and was born at the beginning of the first Intifada this is correct in terms of the timetable, but it's not correct in the terms of the developments which brought, at the end of the day, to the emergence of Hamas at the 14th of December 1987. As a matter of fact, when I came to Gaza at the mid-80s, 185, 86, Hamas, in the former, I would say, structure, in the former organization, which was called Al-Mujamma al-Islami, the Islamic, gathering, not want to say the word...
Islamic
Mujamma,
Association.
the Islamic Association or the Islamic Center. The Islamic Center, as a matter of fact, was like born in the 70s. And in 1979, I was not that period of time in Gaza. I was not in service in Gaza, in military service there. But in 1979, the paralyzed guy, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, was behind the establishment of Hamas. He came to the Israeli military authorities that period of time, the military government, and asked for a recognition of Al-Mujamma al-Islami, the Islamic Center, which he headed in the 70s in the Gaza Strip. And I think, Yaakov, this was what I called in my book, that I called it the original sin. Because Israel, that period of time in 1979, did not know. And I'm speaking about the military government, I'm speaking about the Ministry of Defense, I'm speaking about the military intelligence of Israel, I'm speaking about the Shabak. They didn't know what does it mean Al-Mujamma al-Islami in the 70s, and what does it mean to give them a recognition in 1979 as an
and I just want to I want to sharpen what you're saying so people just understand who don't know the story. To get recognition basically meant that they could operate inside Gaza, they could create institutions, the Islamic University of Gaza, which became the place where pretty much all the leaders of Hamas went to school, studied there, were the student leaders, were the union leaders, etc. But what it also did, and if you could just explain this, David, there was a reason why Israel agreed to establish the Mujamma was because they saw that it could be a counterweight or a counterforce to who were perceived to be the bad guys at the time, the Fatah guys, right?
Right, because that period of time, you are right, Yaakov, in the 80s, the major force, the major element, the major political, I would say, organization in Gaza was, of course, the Fatah movement, or the movement under the umbrella of the PLO. Basically, the dominant, organization movement is Fatah. And Israel thought that to give them like a permit to work, to operate in Gaza, will bring some kind of stability, that every organization will have to take into consideration the other one, and then they will like ease down the protest and the operation against the Israeli forces being operational in the Gaza Strip. This was in 1979, but no one thought in 1979 what will be the outcome of giving a permission to a radical Islamic force, radical Islamic movement to operate freely in Gaza. And when I came in 86 to Gaza, it was like very clear that the Islamic organization, that Al-Mujamma al-Islami, is trying to control the street, to control the area, to make like a weight against the political, organization of the PLO, the Fatah, basically the Fatah movement, and to be like a rival to the PLO in the area in order at the end of the day to reach the basic power, the prominent power in the Gaza Strip area, and as a matter of fact, in the Palestinian arena. This was in the 80s. And I was very close to Sheikh Yassin that period of time. Sheikh Ahmed
the
Yassin,
spiritual leader, the founding father of Hamas. But you also spent time not just with Sheikh Yassin, but also with Ismail Haniyeh,
exactly,
who was one of the leaders of Hamas, eventually was killed in what seems like a Mossad operation during the war.
Israel took responsibility for
in Tehran. But you told me, David, that you sat with these people many
Yes,
hours, but you felt, I think you had one line to me where you felt the hatred, the hostility shooting
yes,
out of their eyes at you, even though they could
yes,
sit and talk to you about technical issues and logistics and permits, right? They would come to you and they would need a permit to go study somewhere, to leave the Gaza Strip, things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But you felt that hatred already back then.
Yes, Yaakov, you touched a very, very important point here in this regard. Listen, I met all the leaders, all the prominent activists of Hamas in the area. You mentioned some of them, beginning with Sheikh Yassin and getting down, Ismail Haniyeh, and all the other, prominent activists of Hamas in the area, in the Gaza Strip area. One common denominator for all was that in every meeting I had with every one of Hamas activists in the area, I felt the hatred, the animosity. I saw it in their eyes, and I felt like my body is burnt only from the arrows that are being sent to me by the eyes of these people. I still remember, I cannot forget Abdulaziz Rantisi, Dr. Abdulaziz Rantisi. Abdulaziz Rantisi was he was a doctor for children from the refugee camp of Khan Yunis. And he taught in the Islamic University, which was, as you have said before, one of the main stronghold of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, basically in the city of Gaza. And each time he came to my office in order to speak with me, I felt like how the animosity, the hatred is like coming from his eyes when he's looking at me. And this like feeling I had with all the other, people, operatives of Hamas in the area. Every one of them, including, of course, Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh used to come to my office many times, but he was very, he didn't speak a lot. And when I spoke with him, I saw his hatred to me as an Israeli, as a IDF officer, as a Jew. It was very much, tangible, you say, very much. You can feel it when you meet with these kind of people. And this is one of the main elements that characteristics of Hamas people in the area, in the Gaza Strip area. Yes,
I want to ask David, at what point, because Hamas started, as you said, as the Mujama, it started pushing Islamic studies and Islamic institutions. It was about, teaching the youth a new way and a new path forward. But it changed, already in the later 80s, within a couple of years, weapons were discovered in some of their homes. But again, Israel believed at the time, well, these aren't weapons to be used against Israel. These are weapons to be used against Fatah. At what point did you see something here is wrong, is different? This is going to become something else.
listen, you can sense it from the beginning. I'll tell you frankly, even before the eruption of the first Intifada. The first Intifada was erupted December 9th, 1987. Hamas, formally, officially was established at the December 14th, 1987. That is to say, 5 days after the eruption of the first Intifada. But even before the Intifada, I told you beforehand now, I felt the hatred, the incitement against Israel. I can tell you one thing in this regard in order to give you like an example. I remember that like a month or two before the eruption of the first Intifada, we made like a survey, we entered to the Islamic University, as you have said before, which was one of the main strongholds of Hamas in Gaza. We entered inside to see whether there are incitement material, etc., in order to search inside the Islamic University. And I found there, in the office of the rector of the university, I found a flag of Israel with the two strips, blue strips, ahead and down, and with the Star of David in the middle. and inside the Star of David, the heart of the Star of David, a knife is being pushed inside, and drops of blood, red blood, getting down in the flag. It was in the flag. And at the bottom of the flag, and I'm speaking about 2 months before the Intifada, there was a slogan in Arabic saying like this: Zawal Israel Hatmiya Qur'aniya. The extermination, annihilation of Israel is a Quranic order. This was before the Intifada. So what I'm saying is that we knew the philosophy, the orientation, the ideology. We knew that they are totally against Israel, that they would like to wipe us out from the map. We knew all of this. And when the Intifada emerged, of course, all this ideology came to be more known in public, in all the leaflets, in the statements, in the declarations, etc. It's in the books, in every pamphlet, etc. of Hamas. We knew what is the orientation, the ideology, and the ideology is very much understood. Wiping out, annihilation, extermination of the state of Israel, establishment of a Palestinian Islamic state on the ruins of the state of Israel, within a definite known boundaries, borders, from the sea to the river. And this is only the first phase in order to complete, the Islamic ideology in the revival of the Islamic empire as it was after the time of the Prophet Muhammad and the first 4 caliphs, in the time of the empires.
I want to,
yeah.
I want to fast forward with you for a moment to the mid 2000s. Then already you're working in the defense ministry. You're the Arab affairs advisor to the defense minister, and into the mid 2010s, and you are involved in a lot of the conversations, then mostly led by the Egyptians, between Israel and Hamas, because we don't talk directly to Hamas, but we have the Egyptian mediators, the intelligence officials in Egypt, who are serving as the channel between Israel and Hamas. And this is that period that Israel is, I call it the game of whack-a-mole to some extent, right? Every 2 years or so, there's a round of violence. They hit us, we hit them, we knock them on the head, they give us a few blows, and then we kind of create deterrence. We wait, we move on, we hope for quiet for as long as possible. And then usually 18 months, 2 years later, another round of violence, right? We see this after the disengagement in 2006, Gilad Shalit is abducted. In 2006, Operation Summer Rain, 2008-9, Operation Cast Lead, 2012, Pillar of Defense, 2014, Protective Edge. I mean, it's the same story just over and over and over again.
Yes, exactly.
And in this period, though, we are talking to Hamas, just not directly. We're doing it through the Egyptians. I mean, what was the thinking, if you could take us into the defense ministry for a moment? And there were a couple of defense ministers you worked with, so it wasn't just one. So we're not going to put a finger onto one. But what was the overall thinking, David, that this could work somehow, that we could contain this threat, that we could keep going because, yeah, this is just the way it is, right? That was kind of the feeling. This is just the way it is. What was going on there?
Yes, first of all, we have to differentiate between 2 periods of time when we are speaking about the Gaza Strip in the time that you asked in your question. First of all, you know that in 2005, Israel withdrew its forces and the settlers from Gaza, in accordance with a decision taken by then the Prime Minister, the late Ariel Sharon.
Right.
And the withdrawal took place in November. The end of the withdrawal from Gaza was in November 2005. Later on, a couple of months after, there was one of, I would say, the basic, development in January 2006. I don't know if you remember, there were the elections to the Palestinian parliament, to the Palestinian Legislative Council, the Palestinian parliament in January 2006.
And Hamas won those elections.
Hamas won the elections. I was that period of time in charge of the Ministry of Defense to be like in connections with the Palestinian Authority. Basically, I was in connections with the late Saib Barikat, who was the chief negotiator from the Palestinian Authority to Israel. And I understood even before the elections that we are going to see a surprise in terms of the results. And Hamas won the upper hand. And after like a year and a half, listen carefully, Yaakov, came the other development, which was a very dramatic and like a turning point in the situation in the Palestinian arena, basically in the Gaza Strip. And I'm speaking about June 2007, in which at that period of time, this month, there was the taking in a very powerful way, strong way. Hamas took the leadership, kicked out the Palestinian Authority of Abu Mazen in June 2007, and took a total control over the Gaza Strip. Right. And many of the, PLO, Palestinian Authority and Fatah personnel were thrown from the roofs of the high buildings in Gaza to the death that period of time. I think this was like the turning point in terms that Hamas took like a stand, a very firm and strong stand vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority, while Gaza was the main stronghold of Hamas. And as a matter of fact, the chain of developments that came after was the Israeli, military operations in Gaza that you mentioned before, vis-a-vis Hamas. This was like the chain of developments. And as a matter of fact, Hamas, like 30 years after its establishment, established itself as a rival, a very prominent one, a very strong one, to the Palestinian Authority. And you have to understand that Hamas, at the end of the day, was not satisfied in the control over Gaza. Hamas wanted, at the end of the day, to control the PLO, to take over the Palestinian Authority, to be the leading force in the Palestinian arena. This is the strategy of Hamas. And this is why, in all the attempts during, in the last 20 years, 15 years, to have like, I don't want to say ceasefire, but to have some kind of an agreement between Fatah and Hamas, they agreed, but it was only for a short period of time, because at the end of the day, Hamas that didn't want to get to be like in compromise with Fatah. Hamas wanted to control the PLO, to control the Palestinian Authority. This is the strategy, of course, of Hamas. And this is why, of course, that our war now in Gaza is very, very, I would say, important and crucial in order to understand what we are fighting for today.
David, the period, though, and as it developed, of course, we look back now and we say to ourselves, if only we had done this, we should have done that, we could have done this. I mean, it's obviously very easy to look back and put a finger on, well, if we only had done something different. And, in the book, Amir and I detail in great detail, for example, what happened the night between October 6th and 7th and all the warning signs that were there. And unfortunately, the wrong decisions were made, right? The intelligence just wasn't interpreted the right way. It was all seen, but it wasn't analyzed correctly. And I'm curious, why do you think that Israel, because like if we look at things very black and white for a moment, you have a genocidal terrorist organization on your border that is saying, we're coming to kill you. And Israel is basically saying, many more words than this. No, you don't. You don't mean that, right? You just want money. You want workers to come in. You actually want stability. That's not what you don't really want that. And we're watching them practice and train. And we're saying, no, that's not, because we have our friends in Egypt and Qatar and all these other places who are telling us, no, they don't want war. Sinwar doesn't want war. Why do you think it is, at the end, at like the foundation, that Israel didn't believe that what they were telling us was actually the truth?
this was like a mistake taken by the Israeli authorities, the Israeli government. And I'll tell you frankly, I knew from the beginning that with Hamas, there isn't any way to live in peace. Because I understand, you know, the very nature and substance of Hamas. What does it mean, Hamas? Hamas means at the end of the day to eradicate, to annihilate the state of Israel. This is very cut and clear. And I really didn't understand the last 20 years policy of the Israeli government vis-a-vis Hamas. I was against totally the slogan, Yaakov, listen carefully. I've heard time and again since 2010, after all the military operations being perpetrated by the IDF in Gaza, that in Hebrew they say, Sheket ya'aneh b'sheket, which means
right, quiet will be answered by quiet.
Will be answered by silence, quietness by quietness. This is, I think, the most evil, the most, problematic, I would say, policy statement taken by Israel. What is silence will be answered by silence? It means that you are giving away a room for Hamas to develop, to dig more underground tunnels, to be armed more, to have rockets and missiles, etc., to take, to send people, to send the activists, terrorists of Hamas to Iran, to be armed and to be trained militarily by Iran, etc., etc. And this was an evil, a mistake, a big, big mistake taken by Israel. I think from the day one, Israel had to take action in the Gaza Strip. I remember still, I was that period of time in the Israeli military security establishment, in the government, and I know all the hesitations which were that period of time, whether to take military actions or not, etc., etc. At the end of the day, I think that this was a mistaken policy by the by Israel, not to enter to Gaza and not to finish, Hamas many, many years before. And we would like to see, we were like misconceived. I don't know if this is the right term, by all the policy of Hamas, of Sinwar. And this is why we had this big surprise in the October 7th. We didn't know that they are going to attack Israel in surprise. Right. And I think that all 15, 20 years, in the past, the Israeli policy was wrong. We had to go to this military operation very, very early, and not like we did in the last period of time, in the last 2 years.
So let's jump for a moment to where we are right now in this war. What is it? There's talk now, is there going to be a deal? Is there not going to be a deal? Israel is threatening to push into the Gaza city in a larger offensive. What is it that Hamas at this point wants, in your understanding, as someone who has a unique perspective on Hamas? What is it?
First of all, I'll tell you frankly, I think that Hamas is not going to surrender. And I think basically what Hamas wants now is to have like a ceasefire, a period of time of armistice, of no clashes, and no military aggression taken by Israel. Hamas would like a period of time to re-armed again, to be strong again. And this is the primarily, I think this is the policy of Hamas, to have a ceasefire. Hamas is not going to release all the hostages back to Israel, because Hamas knows that this is like a strategic asset by the hands of the people. So Hamas is not going to surrender. What I think is, from the Israeli point of view, what we have to do. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you frankly, there are two basic, I would say, goals put by the Israeli cabinet to the IDF, to the Israeli Defense Forces. First of all, the annihilation of Hamas as a military force and as a government civilian body in Gaza. This is first goal. The second goal is the release of the Israeli hostages. We are speaking now about 48, only 20 of them are still alive. I hope 20 of them are still alive. And this is the second goal. I think that in the prevailing circumstances, Israel has no other choice but to open the war and to enter inside Gaza with full force of the IDF. As you, of course, know, today, 60,000 of the Israelis, we say reserve soldiers, are being recruited to the IDF. Israel has to start the campaign, the military campaign, in full force. I hope that the military campaign will press upon Hamas in order to come to terms and to say we are ready for a deal for releasing of hostages. And I think this is what Israel has to do. If Hamas is not going to answer positively, Israel has to continue until the end, because at the end of the day, listen, Yaakov, carefully, Israel cannot live with Hamas as a strong power in Gaza. It means that at the end of the day, the 7th of October...
In other words, even if there's a new government, what you're saying is even a government not including Hamas, it won't be able to stand up to Hamas.
Hamas has to be out of power. Hamas people, activists, has to be expelled outside of Gaza. Hamas has to be defeated at the end. Listen, and I'm not speaking here about one thing that we didn't touch, the dawah, campaign. I was there in Gaza. I saw the dawah in motion. I saw in the 80s how Sheikh Yassin and the Al-Mujamma Islami activists are working in kindergartens, in schools, in mosques, in public associations, etc., how the dawah is working.
Just for our listeners, just to explain, the dawah is
the incitement. Yeah.
But let's just explain for a moment what the dawah is. All the welfare institutions, all of the social institutions that Hamas created
all the
inside
social
Gaza,
institutions, which is the basis of Hamas organization. This is the ideological, dimension of Hamas. And this is why, by the way, that all the young generation, even today, they are they are saying time and again the incitement they heard, and preaching, of course, to the annihilation of the state of Israel and killing of Jews. And this is something we have to know, and to understand. This is the basis of what's going on right now in Gaza. So Hamas has to be eradicated, to be annihilated. And at the end of the day, there is like a possibility, Yaakov, I cannot hide of you, that if Israel at the end of the day, and this is what I think the chief of staff is very much, aware of, and he doesn't like to see it at the end of the day. But if Israel is going to conquer Gaza, listen carefully, Yaakov, there is a possibility, an option that Israel would be obliged to make a military government inside Gaza. We call it Mimshal Tzva'i. In Gaza, this is like a development that I think I want to believe that Israel is like preparing itself for this scenario. But at the end of the day, it can be something that Israel would have been forced to have in Gaza, a new military, government in Gaza, with in one dimension, we call it a civil administration to take care of the local population. But this is a scenario which we have to take very seriously, because it could be in practical terms, in the future. And this is something we have to be prepared for. I'm not saying we have to do it, and this is not the policy of the state of Israel. And I've heard time and again Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that Israel has no intention to control Gaza, but this is something that we have to prepare ourselves for this, scenario in the future.
Well, retired Colonel David Hacham, former head of coordinator and head of civil affairs in Gaza, the former Arab affairs advisor to the defense minister, longtime analyst and intelligence officer. and a friend and someone who I've long, probably now 20 years have been
Yeah,
picking your
many times in the
brain,
Ministry of Defense.
have been
Yeah.
picking your brain when it comes to the Palestinians in Egypt and Gaza. It's really a pleasure to once again talk to you. And thank you very much for your insight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yaakov, and you are a dear friend of mine. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in today's episode. You can find us, as always, where podcasts can be found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the website of the Times of Israel. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast.